will not step down despite the stiff resistance from the opposition and also from the people on the streets. Highways Minister Johnston Fernando responded to the opposition's criticism, and he said that about 6.9 million people had voted for the president and that the president will not resign of his own. The Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardene has also reportedly ruled out the possibility of the parliament asking Gotabaya Rajapakse to step down. The Speaker said that it was now up to the people who had elected the president to decide the fate of the president. Now, the opposition has declined to join hands with the governments for an interim unity government. Remember, the government's parliamentary majority was shaken after 42 ministers, virtually every single one of the cabinet ministers, decided to walk out and sit as independent members in the House.
I must remind you that President was voted to power by 6.9 million voters. We as a government state our policy. This is it. The President need not resign.
Facing a series of setbacks, Rajapakse revoked the emergency rule ordinance that had gone into effect last Friday. A gazette was issued late on Tuesday night. The move was clearly aimed at avoiding a vote on the extraordinary laws in the parliament, where the Rajapakse government appears to have lost its majority. The revocation, of course, came as a bit of a sudden move, as the ratification by parliament was due on Thursday, and the Sri Lankan government currently is on the edge in terms of numbers and the majority that it may have. Gotabaya Rajapakse's once powerful ruling coalition is in a complete state of turmoil after a string of defections. Dozens of lawmakers have walked out of the ruling coalition and have declared themselves to be independent legislators on the floor of the House. Secondly, the emergency law had zero effect on the protesting citizens. Despite the state of emergency, the protesters were out on the streets, demanding that the government must be held accountable. The government must be held responsible for the sharp rise in the price of essential commodities like food and fuel and other things. Now, the emergency order had actually sparked a resentment among the people. Now, speaking of international pressure, the United Nations Human Rights Council also said that it was very closely watching the deteriorating situation in Sri Lanka. Unprecedented shortages of food and fuel, along with record inflation and blackouts, have inflicted widespread misery in the country. The shortages are triggered by a lack of foreign exchange for imports. The crisis is worsening ahead of the crucial talks scheduled with the International Monetary Fund for a loan program. The public unrest has surged. The ruling family's handling of the debt-laden economy has resulted in street protests. So this is how the people in Sri Lanka are standing up against the complete and utter financial mismanagement by the government as prices go through the roof. The price of food, of medicines, of fuel. The people in Sri Lanka are out on the streets. But in some other nations, even as the price of essential commodities like food and fuel goes up, people still sit at home and accept it as their fate. Street demonstrations in Sri Lanka began last month and have intensified in recent days. During the 5-day period, more than 60 people have been arrested in connection with the unrest. Now, dozens of protesters also gathered near the residence of the Prime Minister in the capital. University students chanted anti-government slogans and also waved placards calling on the country's president to immediately go home. The slogan that the people in Sri Lanka are chanting is Gota, go home, Gota referring to their president Gotabaya. The Sri Lankan doctors have said that they'll also hold a street protest in Colombo as the hospitals have now run out of essential drugs and hospitals are not able to carry out even simple, basic, routine surgical procedures.